afternoon. This is Denise Ward. I'm here, moderator, to introduce you to Aldo Vitigliano. He's running for Rye Town Supervisor. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
So tell our audience, who are you?
Well, Denise, thank you for hosting me. My name's Aldo Vitigliano. I'm a 35-year resident of the village of Portchester. I'm running for Rye Town Supervisor this year. It's an open seat. Supervisor Joe Carvin is retiring, and it's an open seat, and I chose to run. Product of Westchester County, grew up in Valhalla, moved to Portchester in 1982, and I went to Stepinac High School, went to Georgetown University, where I had a degree in history, NYU Law School, and shortly after coming out of law school, I started as deputy town attorney in the town of Rye. Became town attorney and did that for 10 years.
So, okay, so town of Rye. What is the town of Rye exactly?
That's a very good question because a lot of people don't understand this. This broadcast is going to be shown in the village of Mamaroneck, and the best way to describe it is that town of Rye is made up of, fully made up of incorporated villages. So it's comprised of the village of Portchester, half of the village of Mamaroneck, which is the Rye Neck section, and the village of Rybrook. And to give a little background on it, the town was instituted in 1660, I believe, and at that point in time it was just open space for it. As the area became cultivated, there were areas of commerce that developed in Mamaroneck, in Rye City, in Portchester, and so they needed different governments to deal with fire protection, police protection around the areas of commerce. And so village governments were created. And in New York state law, village governments are created under the town government, but the town remains. In 1942, the village of Rye became the city of Rye and split off, leaving the Rye Neck section, Portchester, and what was an unincorporated area. In 1982, by way of a referendum, the people in the unincorporated area decided to form the village of Rybrook, so we became a fully incorporated town.
So what does the supervisor do?
Well, the town's responsibility relates primarily to assessment and collection of taxes. And the supervisor...
Money,
taxes for it. But the supervisor's responsibility is to supervise the town. There is a town board with 4 other town board members. So that board runs what needs to be done in the town.
So we're back to, so the supervisor is the head of this town board, and the assessments are really the primary function of the town board.
What the town of Rye does is its functions are primarily financial. So we do the assessment work for the entire community, and we have over 11,000 parcels valued at over $6 billion. So our assessor, Denise Canara, is responsible for putting values that are incorporated in the assessment roll. The assessment roll is then used by villages, by school districts, by Westchester County, where they say to the town, we need to collect $10 million, go find it. And we have to fairly take what they need, apply it against the assessment roll, and send out tax bills. So we have an assessment function, and then we have a collection of taxes function. We collect over $180 million in taxes and disperse it within 5 days to all the different municipalities.
So all of those villages rely on you to collect it and disperse it to them?
The villages, the school districts, Rye Neck School District, Portchester, Blind Brook School District, all depend upon us. And that's one of the reasons why communities can have a better bond rating, because they will get 100% of the tax money that they need for that particular year.
And the assessments have been a controversial topic of late. They've been highlighted recently, for example, in the Journal News, in terms of being challenged, and they're a controversial topic. How accurate are the assessments in Rye Town, and how often are they challenged?
That's a very good question. Probably about 10 years ago, the town undertook a revaluation, town of Rye. I understand town of Mamaroneck has undertaken a revaluation in the past couple of years on it. When you revalue your property, the prior revaluation was 1967, so you can imagine the changes that were made. When you go to full value assessing, each year the assessor has to adjust the values using a trending analysis, looking at how property values have increased in different areas.
Or decreased, I would imagine.
Or decreased. There was a time when they decreased with the Great Recession. So those values get established, looked at by the assessor, and she only has 3 or 4 people working with her to do this task. We do the best we can in terms of establishing values, and then there's a period where taxpayers can grieve their taxes and say, hey, you got it wrong, or there's a problem, and there's a whole process that goes with that.
And so they are subject to challenge, and then there's documentation that a homeowner would have to produce, and a homeowner or a commercial property owner would have to produce.
Yes, and part of
challenge.
My experience in the past 8 years is that I've been special counsel for the town of Rye. I've defended the assessment role for commercial properties.
And the local municipalities and the school districts rely on the town of Rye, those assessments,
yes,
in terms of their own assessments, to be able to collect their taxes as well.
Correct. The village of Mamaroneck used to have their own assessor, Buddy Wright. He retired, and so now the village uses the town's assessment role. Presumably they save some money on that function by using the function that the town does for them. So they adopt our assessment role, which again is subject to challenge, and if a challenge is successful, there are refunds that may have to be given back.
So this issue of the assessment is an important issue, and it's an important fiscal issue for the taxpayers of the town, and as well also then for the taxpayers of the town of Rye, but also their individual municipalities. Is that what made you decide to step up to the plate as a resident taxpayer as well?
It is a very important issue. The fact that I had experience in this area was one of the things that led me. The reason why I chose to run this year was that it was an open seat. There was talk of a cross-endorsement being done where the voters would not have had the opportunity to elect a supervisor and town board, and I felt that was wrong. I said, we need to have an election. Elections are very important in this country. I want to give the voters a choice. And I have the skills. I've done it. I was town attorney for 10 years. I mean, I know the ins and outs of the town for it. Active in a lot of things, fighting Westchester County Airport back in the 80s, the airport expansion. I was the attorney who gave the opinion that the African cemetery was a responsibility of the town to maintain. I was sued in federal court when I gave an opinion that some of the retiring employees were not entitled to get paid for accumulated vacation time. We were successful in that. So I know the issues cold, and I said, my kids are grown. Let me step up. It's a free country. Part of this country is predicated upon free elections, and I felt it was my responsibility to at least give the voters a choice.
And you wanted to do a little bit more service.
I've always been committed to volunteerism and public service. It's just part of who I am, part of my DNA. Okay. So I'm kind of stepping up for that. I've always done a lot of pro bono work as attorneys. We have an obligation to that. Some of most enjoyable work can be the stuff that we help people out.
So what lines are you running on?
I have the Republican endorsement, and I also have the endorsement of the Reform Party, which used to be the Common Core Party, and they changed their name. So I'm running on 2 lines this year.
Okay, good. Well, good luck to you. So we know why you're running. We know that the assessments, the fiscal issues are important. And I have to say, from the outside looking in as a taxpayer myself in Westchester, fiscal issues are a big driver of many elections. I think that they are one of the drivers that get many people out to vote.
Gets them angry too sometimes.
Gets them angry. But one of the other issues that I heard when I was talking on the street, shall I say, to the taxpayers, to the residents here, particularly locally here in Mamaroneck, is, believe it or not, deer. So the deer in the parks, Right. So, and I know that the local mayor and the board have had some conversations. And there was an article again in the paper about that. The county has said that we can't use some bow and arrow on them. Any thoughts on that? Any ideas? I know this is a continuing conversation.
I think it's a good example of the areas of how our governments have different responsibilities. That is not an issue for town government. Even though we're the superior government, villages exist under us, so to speak, that is not our responsibility to deal with. We certainly can work together, pull things together. I view our role as the grandfather government. The villages are our strong-willed, individuated children. They have their own responsibilities. Every once in a while, we have to pull them together, okay, solve a problem. Examples are, might be your expansion at the airport or tolls on 95 or issues that require us all to work together to get a little more heft with dealing with other layers of government. But Deere is not one of them right now for it. If it turns out that we have some responsibility under state law, certainly we'll do what we need to in terms of that. But I think it's a good way of understanding our primary responsibility is financial, and we've got to do that totally above reproach. We do have several parks. Crawford Park is one. We actually help maintain the bridges in Mamaroneck, the bridges that go over Mamaroneck River. Half are in the town of Rye, half in the town of Mamaroneck. For it, those are the responsibility of the town. That's, again, a historic function, and I believe one or two of them have been recently redone in Mamaroneck.
Okay.
But Deere is not one of them.
Okay. But if these continue to be an issue, we might, you might, as the town, find yourself having to step up to pressure other entities to work with you.
And that's the part of the job that really appeals to me, is that while we have our day-to-day responsibility, which just requires supervision of it, there are opportunities to step out and talk about other different issues in a way that is helpful to the other communities.
Let's go back to the parks for a minute. We have Crawford Park and Oakland Beach. Let's go to Oakland Beach quickly for a moment, just as the winter is starting to come upon us. What are your thoughts about what we could do over at Oakland Beach? I know there's it's a beautiful beach and beautiful opportunities there are there in the summer.
Oakland Beach is run by the Rye Town Park Commission, which was created by the legislature, I think, in 1908. And it was a piece of real estate that was owned by the town, turned over to the Park Commission, and it's managed by the supervisor of the town, the mayor of the city of Rye, mayor of Mamaroneck, the mayor of Portchester, and Rye Brook, and we all come together to keep the beach open. There is a need for further improvements. They've done a beautiful job in terms of the grounds for it. They're looking to make it more handicapped accessible. They have a dog run area for it. So we see the potential to further upgrade the park. Fred Joffrey has done a tremendous job of managing the park. They actually, I believe, are turning in a surplus this year, and surplus or loss is highly dependent upon weather. You have to have the right weather. I did a lot of work over the years with Playland, and weather can really make or break a season. But the fact that the park is run at a profit this year is certainly a good sign, and a lot of it relates to tight management as well. So to the extent that we have the opportunity, we want to invest in the park, invest in the buildings, and see if we can come up with more adaptive uses. The lease for the restaurant is up this year. So there is the potential to do certain things down there.
And what about our other beautiful park, Crawford Park, which many of the residents of Mamaroneck and Larchmont may not even know is available?
Right. Crawford Park is a beautiful piece of property that was donated to the town in the late 70s by Edna Crawford. It was one of the great mansions estates between North Ridge Street and Lincoln Avenue. Beautiful mansion on it. She donated it to the town for the express purpose that it be for recreational use, primarily of an outdoor nature. There's one area that other things can be done with it. But it has this beautiful mansion on it. But the mansion needs some work. It needs some TLC to make it more functional. For example, the town right now is applying for grant money to put an elevator in, make it more handicapped accessible so we can utilize the second floor.
I used it with my Girl Scouts.
Oh, see? So great for it. So the idea is, my running mate was married at the park, Alex Leonzi.
I went to a wedding there too.
For it. So the idea is to see if we can enhance opportunities and spruce it up a little bit. We have to invest in it. That's one of the platforms of one of the planks of our platform is to do study, okay, and then invest in the park.
It's a beautiful location, and the opportunity for all of the residents of Rye Town to utilize it. There's some beautiful locations here on the Sound Shore, and this would be one that all of the residents of the town of Rye should be able to take advantage of, and that would be a great opportunity for everyone.
Certainly, this area is a beautiful area. Westchester County, South Shore is an absolutely beautiful area. I love this area for it. I use the line that, this is a town I come from, Harry Chapin's line for it. We love it, it's beautiful, and we can do better in terms of making it accessible and bringing everybody together a little bit better.
Absolutely. The existing town supervisor, Joe Carvin, is, who obviously not running now, one of his platforms was the dissolution of town government. What is your position on that?
I do not favor dissolution. It's not that I'm adverse to Supervisor Carvin. He did a very good effort to try to see if it was possible, and there were some challenges to it. It would have required really full cooperation. I understand the historic role of the town of Rye. I'm not overstepping it. I have no plans to make it any bigger than it needs to be. Just do our job and do it well, and do it at the minimum cost to the taxpayers. But I do not favor dissolution. I think the residents of Rye Neck likely would have been one of the areas that might have been hurt more by dissolution. And we're not talking huge dollars. The average taxpayer in Rye Town pays about $20 to run town government.
For the year? For
the year. We collect $180 million, but our budget is only $3 million. But out of the $3 million, we only go to the taxpayers and collect about $250,000. The other revenue comes from mortgage tax, fees, licenses, and things of that nature.
Okay, okay. How do things that we hear about very often from other politicians affect the town of Rye? Things like the state tax cap and state mandates. How do they affect us in the town of Rye?
That's a very good question, and one of the benefits of the town being the way it is that we can kind of be the test case on what's wrong with some of the laws for it. So, for example, we have a tax cap in New York. You can't go above 2%. Well, 2% of our levy, since we only levy $250,000, that's about $5,000. That's one extra appraisal for the tax surcharge work. It's not a huge sort of thing. So the idea of a 2% tax cap for a government such as ours, sure, it's a great idea, okay, wonderful to strive for, but it's kind of difficult for us to comply with. Another example is we have to comply with, we're a municipality, we have to comply with prevailing wage. When we do put a project out for bid, whether it's one of the bridge reconstructions or whatever, we have to pay prevailing wage. Those are high wages for it, there's responsibility, record keeping, and that's all important. But when you're talking about smaller type jobs, sometimes we may, I'd love to see the town work to help carve out exceptions for smaller governments, for smaller jobs. I mean, I use the example that my son did a Eagle Scout project and installed a flagpole at Village Hall, Town Hall in Portchester for it, and volunteers came together to do the landscaping, but prevailing wage laws required that the contractor had to agree to pay for somebody to watch us work, and that was just totally silly, and it shows the lunacy of some of the state rules. Right. So sometimes, in an example of the small world of Rye Town government, we can highlight what's wrong with the rules so that perhaps we can carve out some exceptions.
So some of that, almost makes us akin to upstate New York. Some of this makes us very similar to the complaints that we hear from some of the what we'll call the northern tier or the southern tier states.
That's true.
Where they say that some of the rules that are imposed upon this on the state that are imposed by the state shouldn't really apply because we're really a small town.
That is true, but we have to follow the rules that we have.
Yeah. What about things though like pensions and contributions to employee pensions, things like that? Those affect us as well, right?
Those affect us as well. We follow civil service rules in terms of hiring or firing people. We have to do the best we can. But a good example is that when you hire somebody in the tax office, well, maybe they should be able to help out in the clerk's office. So there's some cross-training, and so we may need a little leeway from the Civil Service Commission in terms of some of the responsibilities with the town to make a better utilization. We don't want people sitting around doing nothing. Trust me, the town employees don't sit around doing nothing. We have great employees.
Are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to cross-utilize people?
There is the potential to cross-utilize within departments for it. And they've done it in the past between the assessment and the tax receiver's office. And certainly having sold Town Hall at 10 Pearl Street and moved in on the third floor of 222 Grace Church Street, it's kind of tight quarters, but the idea of somebody covering for somebody else, everybody cooperates and gets it done.
Becomes more uniform.
Exactly.
My office is in 222. We see a lot of weddings going on. It's kind of fun. It's kind of neat. See brides coming through the parking lot. It's kind of neat.
I don't know if the supervisor can do weddings. I think he can. I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
I've never seen Mr. Carvin do them, but maybe he does. We'll have to find out.
That's not why I'm running.
To do weddings. And then I would think that though tax mandates not as relevant to the town of Rye as they would be to things like school districts, right?
Correct. It
Those
certainly
mandates,
impact the school district, the villages, a lot more than they would the town, largely because they're tied to specific functions, responsibilities. And our responsibilities are what I said, very limited for it. And I think it's important. We talk about layers of government. People don't like layers of government. They think it's a waste. When you see what we do, if we didn't do it, all the other communities would have to do it. So if we understand that we're really not duplicating services at different levels of government, there really aren't too many opportunities for shared services with what we do, because we've pared back to just the minimum, and it's a very important minimum that we need to do.
You mentioned a couple of items a minute or two ago, though, that I wanted to just go back to. You mentioned a couple of things that might seriously affect these communities. You mentioned things like throughway tolls on 95, airport expansion. How would those things, how would having the town of Rye in place, and how would your position as a supervisor be helpful to, and your previous experience be helpful to the town and to the people in this community?
Sure, that's a very good question. The town, being the superior government, does have a little bit of clout that it can use in ways to help all of its villages. And examples that I use is when I was town attorney, Donnie Joffrey was supervisor back in the 80s. That was the time when we had the Quonset hut at Westchester County Airport, and there was talk to put in a new terminal. And the town led a consortium of towns, Mamaroneck, Harrison, North Castle, Mount Pleasant, town of Greenwich, to basically sit down with the county executive and say, be careful what you're doing here, because there's noise that impacts us for it. I think everybody would agree that Westchester County Airport now has turned into a beautiful facility. There is talk right now about removing one of the restrictions, which relates to the number of passengers that can go through the terminal at any particular time. It's 240 a half hour. That's the sort of thing that we would need to be very careful on, so that we may need to pull everybody together again to just make sure that everybody is protected. Aircraft has gotten a lot quieter. That was one of the goals of trying to make sure that we could get to Stage 3 aircraft. That is a lot quieter, so there's not as much of a problem as it was. But there is more land area than LaGuardia at Westchester County Airport, so we have to be a little careful in terms of that. Another example is throughway tolls.
Right.
You put tolls on 95, traffic is going to go on the local roadway for it, and that's something that perhaps we can pull some kind of traffic summit together between the communities to just pull in the county, pull in the state, and say, what can we do better so we don't have traffic problems.
Yeah, because you could just see people jumping off of 95 in New Rochelle, coming straight up of Boston Road, and going straight through Portchester. And there's already quite a bit of congestion on those roadways, and adding that straight through Greenwich is going to be...
And my office is in Rye, and I'm the traffic cam for 95. I can tell whether the traffic is
I'm in
stopped there or not. So
absolutely, you can see it. It's already quite a congested area, and adding traffic there would be so. As the supervisor, you'd be able to have your finger on the pulse of that. And your previous experience, how would that help you in these areas?
Well, having been involved in government, I've passed legislation, worked up at the county for a while. I know how to get laws passed. I know how laws are passed. I know how to push buttons to and get people to return phone calls for it. And I think that's important in the job of supervisor, to help. And if we do that for helping people, that's what it's all about. One of our slogans is public interest above self-interest, and that's real. We're here to help make government work better.
So what is your plan? Tell me what your main plan is.
We came out with a 5-point plan, but it's basically invest in the parks, strategic planning, figure out what we need, try to find some grant money for it, and do it for it.
Where are you going to tap into for grant money?
Examples are community development block grant money. There are public-private partnership potentials for it. We're going to try to find it wherever we can.
Okay.
In terms of their volunteer groups that have done a great job, but we're trying to see what we could do better. I mean, Pepsi recently did something in the schools for it. The great corporations here, sometimes they just need to be asked for a specific project for it. Assessment is a primary focus. It's got to be transparent. It's got to be right. One of the things that bothers me on the campaign trail, I've met some people who said, you know, my assessment, I bought the house for this, but it came in at that. Those are problems that can be easily fixed. And I'm going to try to make sure that the assessment office is as user-friendly as it can be for the people.
How's the website now?
They just recently upgraded the assessment website. It's great. The receiver of taxes website could use a little work. Other communities have a listing of what taxes you paid in the past. We're going to try to upgrade that, and that's another plank. Okay. A fourth plank is cutting back within the administration offices to the extent they need be. We don't need to study dissolution anymore, so we might be able to save a little bit in terms of that. I'm going to slash the legal budget for it and get everybody focusing on what they need to do. I have a plan in terms of how to handle tax surcharges in a better way, and being special counsel, I know where we can save some money in terms of that. So all of these factors, you know, assessment office, tax office, parks, that's what we intend to do. Not huge stuff, okay, but it's very important to the people.
In the town of Rye, what would you like to see it? Where would you like to see it in 4 years? What would you like to see happening here in 4 years?
We always talk about, you know, being a model community. I mean, I have the opportunity to travel quite a bit, and people have very, very fond memories of the time that they passed through. Oh, you're from there. I remember that. I went here. I went there, and I think that's great. So I'd like to build on that reputation for it. I'd like to know that when our kids go out and look for jobs for it, and somebody sees, oh, you're from Mamaroneck, you're from Portchester, you're from Rye Brook, it means something for it, that they know that those are good people for it. Okay, the people in this area, they put down roots. Okay, a lot of people pass through here. Okay,
that's true. But
the people who stay and have put down roots, God bless them. They are solid people for it, and their kids are solid people. So when they go out in the workforce, I want companies to recognize and say, "You're from there, terrific." I use the line that when the next Mark Zuckerberg graduates from Blind Brook, or Mariano Rivera, gets out of Portchester High School, or someone else from Rye Neck High School, and goes out and does well, they remember where they came from, so that our kids can say, "Hey, got an internship over there? Come on in for it." That's what I'd like to see. Pass it from generation to generation, help the next person. That's
a nice heritage, and that's a nice ambition to have. And I think that it looks like you have some good goals for the town of Rye. I wish you a lot of luck in your campaign. And do you have any final thoughts for the people of the town of Rye?
I just urge everybody to vote.
When is Election Day?
Election Day is November 3rd. It's absolutely critical. I'm the generation of peace on it. I was the first year that didn't have to register for the draft, and I know how important it is. My running mate Alex Leonzi is a Marine. He knows what he fought for, okay, over the years, and what his buddies did. And I think it's important that we have to get off our butts and go out and vote when we have the opportunity to for it. It's just critical to that. I mean, I look around in my community, and we see monuments to veterans for it. A lot of people came before us, and we have a responsibility to the next guy and to the next generation to do the best we can. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Aldo. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you best of luck in your election.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you.
Bye-bye.